Hi, I'm Jacqueline Jackson. I teach in District 13 in Brooklyn, New York at the Magnet STEM School of PS 307, fourth grade. Today's lesson was a shared inquiry discussion analyzing a particular text in response to an interpretive question. Students were required to discuss the question with each other, answer the question with evidence from the text, supporting their ideas, and explaining how the text evidence supported their assertions.
All right, so I'll start moving into the questions. So first question is, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge? What was taught before the lesson and what will come after it?
Okay, well, one thing is that this lesson is actually in a series of lessons in the Junior Great Books methodology. On the first day, there's a read aloud of the same text where they actually get to closely listen to the text and ask questions afterwards. And then on the second day, they actually are asked to directly focus on particular aspects of the text given these markings. In this case, the story is read a second time, and then they are to mark the text in two different ways, whether they felt that someone was changing or not changing, whatever the markings might be, and then just to tell what text they marked, why did they mark it that way, and explain their thinking. After that, on the third day, we actually go over vocabulary. So they've actually seen the text 3 different days. The first day, a read aloud. Second day, they interact with the text as it's being read. Then they read it. They come up with ideas that they're discovering from the text. And then finally, vocabulary is discussed. And on the fourth day, an interpretive question is asked. After they have fully understood the factual details of the story and discuss some of the various ideas that might come up in the text. And then on that day, they are to actually be able to use all of their understandings that they've acquired in answering a question that is posed to them that they had not yet heard with text support. So that's how it ties in.
Great. Is the text used in this lesson part of a sequence of texts designed to build skills and knowledge?
Yes, well, there are 3 major components to this shared inquiry methodology. One is being able to infer ideas from a text based on the motives, the actions and the events in the story. And they are to infer the motives, they are to infer all these different, concepts and ideas from the actual text, and then support it with text evidence where these ideas come from. So ideas is one of the major components, that children are to actually come up with their own ideas after reading the text. Another is that they are able to explain with text evidence, support these ideas that they infer or, are derived from the text. Then finally, one of the other components is that they must be able to respond to one another. They're supposed to be able to hear whether a student asserts an opinion that is similar to their own or contrary to it, and be able to come up with the text evidence in support of or in contradiction to some of the things that they hear from one another. So there are 3 major components: your own original ideas that are derived from the text, your explanations of the text that helped you to come up with those ideas, and then of course you being able to respond to your classmates in ways that show that you agree or disagree and why.
Talk about the standards targeted in the lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard?
Okay, well, of course, there's reading standards, writing standards, and the listening and speaking standards. So, starting with the reading standards, they must read a text that is complex and has many levels of interpretation to it. So, the text in and of itself, thank you, ma'am, Langston Hughes, definitely was complex, higher order thinking text. That allowed children to really closely read and come up with a variety of different interpretations from the text. Another thing about listening and speaking is that they also had to provide text support or text evidence for their ideas. The standards require that the questions that are being asked are text-dependent questions, and thus the students know that their assertions always have to be followed up by text evidence. Additionally, they are not allowed simply to provide text evidence in support of an assertion, but they also must be able to justify the selection of that particular text. In the area of listening and speaking, students must engage in conversations where they discuss, various ideas with one another. So in this particular setting of the shared inquiry model, they have the opportunity to exchange ideas with one another, to assert their opinions, and then, of course, refute one another's opinions in support of their own ideas. So the setup of the lesson, having a strong text, a text that they have all read, an interpretive question that allows them to go back to the text to support assertions. All of these things are in alignment with the reading, writing, and listening standards that were chosen, that were, a part of this particular lesson.
Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplifies?
Well, definitely the level of text. Okay, core action 1 talks about having high quality levels of text with good vocabulary. And this, of course, was written by Langston Hughes. So some of the vocabulary, blue suede shoes and latching, and, were words that they wouldn't normally, use in their day-to-day language. And so it was really fun exploring the different dialect in the story. Thank you, ma'am, and gnome. So there was definitely that measure of a difference in the language, the tone of the text, the level of the text. So core action 1 definitely, but also because it is a shared inquiry discussion, there were lots of opportunities for students to engage and talk with one another. So that would be core action 3. I often, notice that certain children, if they're not kept close to one another because they built certain relationships. So I had them closer to me and each other, so that you can control some of that, but it also made them feel more comfortable. They were able to participate. The level of participation was increased due to some of the changes in just the way that they sit with one another, the partnerings, the pairings, and allowing them to have time even before the discussion to talk to a partner. To discuss what that answer the question might be from their perspective. So there was that also an opportunity for them to all participate by partnering them together, and also by sitting them in relationship with those that they were more comfortable with and giving them all an opportunity to discuss the focus question with one another. Text dependency also is core action 2. It's a big one, but that is in alignment with, the standards as well, that the questions that were asked had to be text dependent questions, and the responses had to be, fueled with support for their ideas from the text.
Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
It's funny, you asked about the standards and then you asked about the shifts. Although today we were reading a story, the shift said that there's to be a mixture between, a balance between fiction and nonfiction text. Junior Great Books predominantly is fiction text, but during the course of the school year, we were also using ReadyGen materials, and we basically use a similar methodology with the students on nonfiction text, so that they always knew that any assertions that they made about anything regarding the text, they had to use text evidence to support. So that major shift between balancing text, between fiction and nonfiction, we have that here in that we use both Junior Grade Books, we use ReadyGen, which has the science and social studies integration. Then also the fact that they are discussing these higher level text. The fact that we read aloud with them gives all children access to the text initially, and that is that close read that they otherwise might not be able to access the text because of the higher lexile level and the complexity. But the fact that we have those 3 consecutive days of actually closely reading the text also speaks to the shifting of more complex text read closely, more text-dependent questions, the mixture between fiction and nonfiction. So we've addressed those particular standards in, this way by having this high order literature program.
How did you support all students in working with grade level text? For example, how do you provide scaffolding for students below grade level so they can read grade level text?
Okay, so as I said before, there were 3 days that we actually worked with text. The first day is a shared reading. Okay, so although I may be reading aloud, they actually can go and listen to the story read to them on audio also for those students that need that. We discuss it in groups. We discuss it in partnerships. So there's many different access points for students who are having difficulty with the text. So the shared reading, then the partnering, then there are questions that are scaffolded for some students when we're actually going through what is the story mostly about clarifying the details. They're often given a scaffolding sheet. You know, it's a throwback to second and third grade, but I found that if you use those someone wants something but so and scaffold, it allows them to look at the characters in these meaningful ways in different contexts. It's not just one line of reasoning as to what a character wants, but as the character changes, those scaffolding sheets allowed them to see the character in many different ways, but it gave them a frame that they were familiar with to talk about those characters. So we use the graphic organizers, we use partnerships, we use reading the story over several days and taking time to closely read it in a shared reading, talking about vocabulary and so forth.
And what do you do for students who are more advanced to engage more deeply in grade level text?
It's very interesting that you said that, what do I do for those students that are more advanced? I'm presently teaching in an IEP classroom, which is an integrated team teaching classroom. And there are a couple of students here who are more advanced than other students who may have some type of lag. And what happens is, generally speaking, those students are given opportunities to partner with one another and do extension activities. There's essay writing, the fifth day after the shared inquiry discussion. They get to choose whether or not they want to write an opinion piece or an informational piece or to do some type of other extension activity after they've maybe fulfilled the requirements of just writing a simple text essay in support of the focus question.
How do you know the students were able to successfully respond to the text-dependent questions and tasks with precision?
Okay, well, definitely during the course of the discussion, there is a table chart where, I actually keep their names down and I check off who's participating, what their ideas are in those three domains. What were the ideas that they were expressing? What were some of the text evidence that they were giving in support of their answers? And then how did they respond to one another? Was there an element of I agree and disagree? If you disagreed, what did you disagree with in particular? And what supporting evidence can you, provide to support your disagreement? So we kind of keep track of that with a tracking sheet to gauge participation, gauge whether those three elements, the ideas, the evidence, and the responses to one another is going on during the discussion. And then afterwards, they actually do an assessment. How was our collaboration assessment with those ideas in the various domains as a part of that collaboration assessment?
Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson?
They very much work together, sharing their ideas, taking turns with one another, listening to each other, responding directly to one another, indicating where there was a breakdown, asking for clarification, telling one another I don't agree and why they did not agree.
Reflecting on the lesson, what worked particularly well and what might you do differently?
What worked particularly well was the arrangement of the students in the classroom for the discussion into partnerships initially. Giving them the additional 5 minutes to write an answer to the focus question that they had just been presented with, had not seen before. In times past, I would give them 5 minutes, but I noticed that there were struggling students coming up with that initial response. So I actually increased the number of minutes to 10 minutes at the beginning of the lesson to allow them time to actually come up with an idea associated with the focus question and then to come up with some text evidence in support of that prior to the discussion. So I think the extension of time at the beginning was helpful. The partnering and pairing of students in ways that they normally don't sit and to support them being able to share their ideas with someone that they were comfortable with, I think that also helped to make the discussion more viable.
Last question is, were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
Yes, I think to be really honest with you, the most surprising of student behaviors was that there were very few misbehaviors. And I think it was largely because of the cameras. Generally speaking, these discussions can tend to go on longer than students would like. To be fairly, to be honest about it. And at times you will have more squirming than you saw today. You would have students talking over one another more than you saw today, which is pleasantly surprising. So therefore, those surprises were pleasant surprises. Nonetheless, they were surprises.
Great.
Thank you.
Good job. That was a great class, by the way.
Unbelievable.